Hello, everyone. My name is Rafal, and I'd like to welcome everyone to my Hatchet Photography podcast. Today, I have a special guest all the way from New York City. Joe Jenkins is in the house. Amazing photographer, specializing in headshots and events. I want to focus mostly on headshots because you've done some amazing work. You also work with some of the amazing movie stars and directors and all this stuff. I want to dive into that world too, because getting these people, I think, at the front of the camera is not easy, I guess, and having that privilege also is a kind of experience. But before we get into it, I just want to welcome you and thank you for accepting my invitation. I know we've planned this very on a short notice, so I truly appreciated your time. And yeah, I have a bunch of questions, and again, thank you for joining the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So let's jump in. Before we go into this, interesting stuff, could you share with us a little bit more about how did you even get into this industry? Like New York City, I know it's the
So,
capital of headshots. So
so my response to this question is probably one of the more random ones you'll hear, but I actually
Mhm.
got into photography through a scam on Craigslist.
Okay.
Somebody tried to scam me, and so
Oh wow.
it was 2013, and I just quit my full-time job. I had no idea what I was going to do. I just knew it was going to be that. It was a job and it wasn't a career, and so I just quit very precipitously one day. And I had I had a decent amount, like, I mean, it's New York, so I had enough money to last me a few months to figure out what to do. But, an interesting thing about living in New York is that it really type A's you. And so after about a week of just sitting around, I just got really antsy and restless, and I just wanted to get out of my apartment. And so I went on Craigslist looking around for miscellaneous things to do. And one of those things to do was to do extra work on movie sets. And like, I can't really sit through a movie for any length of time anymore, unless it's by like a really revered director. Like I just saw One Battle After Another, I think is the title of it, the Paul Thomas Anderson movie, because I'll see any movie he puts out. But at the time, like movies were like my main form of escape. I could just watch them over and over. And so I saw that out on Craigslist, do extra work on movie sets, and I was like, that sounds amazing. So I went in. It was this like quote unquote talent agency, and it was a cattle call. There were like a million people in the lobby. Um, you know, nobody had any acting experience. Everybody just wanted to be famous. There was like some guy butchering a monologue from The Godfather in the corner. And so I went in and I read this woman like handed me like what probably was the size of like a strip of paper you'd find at a fortune cookie. And she was like, all right, read this line. I read this line. It might have well have been like past the chips or something. And she was like, all right, well, good luck. We'll see if you get the part. And I was like, I don't know what part you're talking. Like I knew I wasn't in the industry, but like I knew enough about extra work and how it worked. And I was like, it doesn't work like this, but whatever. I went home. And so she told me to call this number the next day. And so I called the number the next day. It was at 8 a.m., which I thought was a bizarre time to call a number like as a follow-up, but I was like, whatever, I'll do it. So I called the number and this guy picks up. His name is Tom. And he just sounded like a used car salesman. And he confirmed some basic information about me. And then when he did so, he like his entire tone changed. And he was like, Joe, everybody here, we all got to, man, we're so excited about you. And as soon as he said that, I was like, oh no, this is a scam. This has been a waste of time. But I was curious to see what the scam would be. And so he's like pitching me on all this exciting work they're doing with Liam Neeson and Kevin Bacon and stuff like that. And I'm like waiting for the angle to present itself. And finally he's like, huh. And I'm like, what's that, huh, Tom? And he's like, Joe, I don't see any headshots. And I was like, oh, you want to sell me headshot? You want to sell me things? And so I knew at the time I had like peripheral awareness of headshots and what they were. And like, I wasn't a photographer. I owned a camera because I was selling secondhand clothing on eBay. And that's where I really got my basics in photography from, because like I could never be one of those people that just like threw a shirt down on the floor and then like took a photo of it with their phone and like put it up for sale. Like I had to do things sort of semi properly. I would like actually model the clothing myself in my apartment and like put the camera on a tripod with a timer. And I live on the first floor, and so every now and then somebody would just walk by, and they would like see, and there would be no context. So a person would walk by and just look in, and they would just see like a person standing there alone in a living room like this, because they were like, and so they would have no idea what was going on. But that's fine. And so I had a camera at the time. I had a shoot-through umbrella. I had a cheap light stand and a speed light. And this guy had just tried to scam me to buying headshots. So I had some peripheral awareness of what headshots were. I knew they were a thing for actors. And when you're not a photographer, you hear that headshots are this thing that like somebody charges like $800 for, which seems like magic money. And so I hung up on Tom. I said some very explicit things to Tom. I hung up on him. And then I remember walking down the street, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to start taking headshots. And so I went back to Craigslist, put an ad up entitled free headshots, and then just like met a bunch of randos for like 3 or 4 months, like taking their headshots. And then after, I even remember calling my mom, and she was like, and I was like, hey, so I figured out what I'm going to do. And she was like, oh, great. What are you going to do? And I was like, I'm going to start taking headshots. And she sounded like mildly disappointed, because I think she was hoping, and she was like, well, I don't know what those are, but good luck. And I was like, no, thanks. And so I went back on Craigslist and put up an ad, like I said, entitled free headshots, and then just met a bunch of random. And after every time I would take a headshot, I would put it in a tumbler. And then after, I think maybe like a month and a half, some guy emailed me and asked me if I wanted to shoot his wedding. And it was like a city hall wedding. It wasn't like a wedding. It wasn't like he was paying me thousands of dollars. He paid me $400. But the idea of like somebody paying me money to do photography, it was like, just blew my mind. And I actually said no, because it seemed like such a huge responsibility. And the more I said no, the more he like it was almost like it was like he was like chasing. The more I said no, the more persistent he became, because it was like, oh my gosh, this person actually cares. And then I was talking to my mom once again and telling her about it. And she was like, well, to be honest, like if he hires a wedding photographer, like an actual like quote unquote wedding photographer, and pays that person $400, they can't be that good. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. And so then I went back and I said, yes, I shot this guy, this guy's wedding at City Hall. And that was the beginning. Yeah.
So tell me how this whole thing started turning into the business, because, like, as you probably know, shooting stuff for free and, try to get into this industry is a one thing. But then at some point you have to start, okay, no, I have to start making money. I have some people, trying to, get their headshots. You know what you're doing at that point, I'm guessing, right? So like it seems like you get hang of it, and then you're like, okay, now I can make money. So tell me about that transition, because it seems like a lot of people kind of don't know when they should start, right? And they just doing this because they either have like a low self-esteem, and they're like, okay, my work is not good enough. So tell me a little bit about that kind of process in your career, how this whole thing turned into the actual business where you start charging the money, kind of getting clients and making this like a, business venture.
I think that you should start charging money as soon as you can possibly start getting money. Like, don't feel like you need to get to this place that is perfect, because then you'll just never start. Then you'll never get there. I got into photography at a very opportunistic time, because I got into it during what I kind of like to call like the golden age of gig sites. And so do you guys have TaskRabbit?
No.
So TaskRabbit is an app on the iPhone, and people use it for mostly just kind of like miscellaneous errands and tasks they don't feel like doing themselves. And now people mostly use it for like, they buy something from IKEA and they need somebody to like come and install it or something like that, and they don't feel like doing it themselves, or like fix their leaky faucet or anything like that. But back in the day, TaskRabbit used to be and it auto matches. It's a matchmaking system now, but back then it used to be this like kind of open platform and people would have the most random tasks that they would post, where it would just like super, they were all over the place. But like once, twice, three times a week, there would always be somebody with like a photography related need. I remember like one time I did a job where I got paid like $20 to just go and take like a photo of a corner of like Washington Square Park. And so in the very early days when I still had a part-time job, I, sourced work from TaskRabbit, and then this site called Thumbtack came along, and that's where I like really, really got my initial start because their Thumbtack. I don't use that site at all now, and I'm not going to say anything about that. But back in the day, they had, I think it was like 2015, where they had just received like $300 million of venture capital from like Google funds and all sorts of things like that. And so they were just burning huge cash loads of money on Google AdWords, and they were sending it out in like the form of photography leads. And so you would buy a lead, beforehand, typically for like $8 per lead, and then that would enable you to contact the person that that sent out the request. And so they were sending me like 20 leads a day, and I mean, it's not like I was purchasing all 20 of them, but I was purchasing, like if I purchased like 4 or 5 leads in one day, I had a pretty good response rate because I had a nice website. I've always kind of traditionally had an eye for web design, and I've kind of just always done it. And two, my work was like good enough right from the get-go where I could just start charging people. But I don't want you to think, however, that you need these things to start getting work. You can start getting work like literally right away. I think that part of the reason why I started getting work right away was because I started using off-camera lighting right away. Like my, literally my first headshot session with this dude was in Washington Square Park, and I had a speed light and a shoot-through umbrella, and like him and I were both like amazed. It was almost like I took like I was like, because it's like the first, if you're not familiar with like professional photography, the first photo, like I remember, if you're not familiar with professional photography and you don't have any experience with lighting whatsoever, the first photo you ever take with off-camera lighting is like revelatory. It's like, it's like you just look down and you're just like,
what did I do?
Did you ever see Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade?
Yes.
Where he's in the library and he's like doing the thing. No, he's like pounding on the floor, and suddenly the librarian's like stamping her book at the same time, and it coincides with Indiana like slamming on the floor while the librarian is also at the same time stamping her book, and then she picks up the stamp and she's like this. Like that was me with the camera. I was just like, wow, that really just happened. And so if you start using off-camera lighting like right away, I think that just puts you ahead of a lot of photographers that don't, and that just kind of rely on parks and things like that to because I feel like the majority of photographers that start out they do portraiture and they do it utilizing natural lighting, and so if you can kind of figure out a way to give yourself an edge over that, and I did not do that intentionally, I just did it because at the time I used to, when I first got into photography, I read obsessively about it, and there used to be this blog called The Strobist. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I went on The Strobist. That was honestly where I got my initial lighting gear. Was they had like an affiliate link on there. I think it was for Midwestern Photo, where they offered like a light stand, a shoot-through umbrella, and a speed light with a sync cord cable. And I remember purchasing those things for my little eBay setup, and then using those for my first set of headshots. But in terms of where you need to be, like, just start charging people right away. I mean, and honestly, like, I mean, yeah, there's no perfect time. There's never going to be a perfect time. Yeah, that's my answer to that.
So let's talk a little about the lighting, because that's something with a lot of people, and I know the equipment, and as you probably also know, like in this industry, everyone is just obsessed with the gear, with lighting,
Right.
and all this stuff. And I think there's two different paths, right? Like you can simplify everything, get the stuff what you like, and then kind of keep shooting and focusing on the actual work, or you can just constantly obsessed with, the new gear, new equipment, new lighting setups, and all this stuff. So tell me a little
Mhm.
bit about, like, so you discover your kind of like off-camera lighting
Mhm.
setup and system.
Right. Yep.
Did you modify it over the time, or you just kind
Oh
of
yeah,
stick
of
to it?
course. I
Yeah.
mean,
Okay.
I mean, my lighting is still very simple, and I work for a lot of really major agencies in New York, and I still like I have like I have four Profoto D2s,
Mhm.
and then I have two D1s, but I literally only use like two or three of them. Like one of my D2s blew up, it blew a capacitor the other day, and I had that like my brain immediately catastrophized it. Like, what are you gonna do? But I never use it anyways. Like,
Mhm.
at the end of the day, like I literally, and it's not like most of my lighting all the time is just like 45, 45, like a key. So I use a parabolic reflector. Um, in the vast majority of my shots, set at 45, 45. Although if I'm doing, like, I work a lot in fashion too. And so if I'm working in fashion, then I'll either do like a 45, 45, or I'll just like boom it out right
Mhm.
overhead. But like my lighting is like generally super simple. I don't really obsess over like intricate lighting setups or anything of that nature. I mean, I may progress into that. I do try new things, and it's always good to do so. But at the end of the day, I don't know. My approach is like very organic.
Yeah. Okay. So let's kind of move forward and let's talk a little bit about your headshot style.
Okay.
I know every photographer, is trying to somehow get this kind of like unique. I don't want to say unique, but the kind of style which is recognized is your work.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I'm gonna just pull up your website for a second, and we can just kind of quickly take a look at some of the stuff you've done. So how did you? Well, because I know from even my own experience,
Hmm.
when you're starting, you're just kind of guessing, right? You're trying this, you're trying that, and you
A
try to
thousand
find,
percent.
yeah, exactly, and you're trying to find what uh, suits you, what the stuff you like, what the stuff you don't like. We're getting inspired by other photographers, and you try to somehow implement, some of those things into our work. Tell me a little bit about how you develop your own style. Like, is this is consistent right now, or you probably kind of see this massive shifts over the time with the style you shoot your headshots?
I mean, my work has definitely shifted quite a bit over the
Hmm.
years. I think before I used to kind of use lighting to like really sell like the sizzle,
Hmm.
and so like I used like clamshell like pretty much wherever I went. Which if the viewers are unfamiliar, a clamshell is basically just like you are booming out a light overhead, and then you're putting a light under
Hmm.
right under the person. Um, but I was just doing that over and over and over, and after a while, I got bored. Um, but it's. I mean, my work is 1,000 miles away from where it started, and I don't even really know what my kind of style is or my
Hmm.
approach to like getting the shots that I do. It's I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, like my lighting setups are all pretty, like if you look at the lighting on the far right, that actress, those are three Kino flows actually.
Okay.
And then the shot of Martin Scorsese is the lighting's pretty flat in that. I had like just a softbox boomed out overhead. It was like
Hmm.
clamshell-ish. The lighting was a little more on axis, and then I had like a strip box underneath, and that was it. I actually had to kind of Photoshop the right area because there was a shadow behind him because I literally only had like 3 seconds to get that shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then like the two actresses on the right are Kino flows as well. But like for the most part, I pretty much just alternate between like I cycle between a few different, just like a few simple setups. But I would say that like 45 degrees is always like kind of like the one
Yeah.
that I use the most.
Okay.
45, 45.
Perfect. So let's talk a little bit about, and that's also what I'm very interested in, your approach to headshots, because I know people kind of approach them differently. Some people like to shoot them quickly, in and out. Some people like to take a little bit of extra time to work with your clients. I know it depends on the type of work we're getting, right? That sometimes we have that time, sometimes we don't. But what is your ideal kind of like way of shooting your headshots? And if you could just kind of walk me through the process of working with your subjects, with your clients, how this whole thing kind of works. Are you having like studio, or are you kind of like all over the place? Like how this whole thing looks like in
So
your case?
So I have a studio now, and it's in
Okay.
Williamsburg. I occasionally, I think I have I'm fairly certain I have an on-location job next week. At this point, I pretty much prefer to work out of my studio, and I offer like a LinkedIn special for like $200. It's in and out in 10 minutes, and that's just
Okay.
like geared towards people that are like just starting out and unfamiliar with, one, the cost of headshots, and two, they're just starting out and just don't have a ton of money. But I can at this point, I can pretty much just take like a beautiful headshot in like five minutes, because my approach to headshots is really, I'm a very conversational person, and I just really enjoy. I think one of the greatest aspects of this job is, especially when it is that there's very, very few instances in the world where you meet somebody for the first time, and then the two of you just spend that, and then the two of you just spend ensuing time together alone in a room for an hour, 2 hours, 10 minutes, whatever, and then you just talk to that person. I mean, the only other, the only other, the only other instance of that is like a therapist-patient relationship, or something similar to that. So, and I get along really well with people, and I just enjoy those situations. I work, like I said, I work a lot in fashion, and I do a lot of work, and I don't have any of my fashion work up on that site, but I work for a ton of agencies, and I shoot a lot of models, and like at least one out of every 3 shoots, the model's always kind of talks about how it's like refreshing that the photographer talks to the person, because a lot of photographers that work in fashion just kind of like silently click away, which can be pretty offsetting when you're alone in a room with that person. But I think that the expressiveness in my portraits probably does come from the ease with which people feel around me, just because I enjoy speaking with people. I enjoy. It's weird too, because I'm a very introverted person. I'm alone most of the time, but when you come to my studio, I'm like kind of immediately your bro or something.
Yeah.
Like I'm immediately friends with people, and so and I think that comes out a lot in my shots. But I mean, in terms of like how much time I need once the lighting is set up, like I could do a headshot in like 2 minutes. I could do a really good headshot in like 2 minutes, if need be. And especially when you get like corporate headshot sessions, for instance, where they'd be shooting like 50 people in one day. Sometimes that's really the only time that you need. But also too, you get, if you light a person's face properly and you position it properly and you know what to look for, you know how to direct them, like it's not really an intangible. It's like, that's a beautiful photo of your face, it's not like something that's like really left up to, I mean, there are of course, different ways to angle the person and stuff like that, but like just a beautifully lit photo, like a beautifully lit front on photo of a person's face, with it positioned properly is almost 99% of the time a good headshot.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit more about the business itself, because I think a lot of people, shooting is a one thing, but when it comes to running a business is a completely different story.
Right.
And also I found with with the last few years, seems like, this entire industry has changed, right? There's more headshot photographers. There's more competition. There's definitely also a lot of different styles, different concepts. People approach headshot photography differently. So what is your kind of like I don't know, way of doing your business, your marketing, like how you promote yourself, how you're getting the clients at the front of your camera? Is this a word of mouth, or you doing any type of advertising, or you already have such a kind of established position where the work comes to you? Like how that works in your case?
Honestly, it's a pretty healthy mixture of all those things. I use Google AdWords. I advertise for the keyword Headshots NYC. I have an SEO guy.
Mm-hmm.
um, and those are two channels. And then outside of that, I work with a number of different agencies. Like I have a few PR agencies that are clients. I literally did a job just last night for one. That was for a brand. And so, your approach to business as a photographer should be to try to keep those revenue channels as varied as possible, and to
Mm-hmm.
just get money coming in from as many different directions as possible, whether it be like cold outreach. So here's a perfect example. Like I'm really busy. And it's just New York. Everybody is. But I mean, I've been like obsessing over my SEO for the past like year or so. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to try cold outreach. And I literally, on my very first cold outreach email ever, I got a response. And not only did I get a response, but it was from a company that is literally like one of the largest companies. They have like $9 trillion worth of holdings or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked me to like send them like a pitch deck, which I never did, because it's just like that's just another job, and like putting together that. I feel like going back through your work and trying to find like the best instances of it and putting together in like a cohesive presentation is like a job unto itself, which I don't relish. But you just have to try to get as many tendrils out there,
Mm-hmm.
and those will all come together into a knot of monthly income, hopefully.
Yeah.
But yeah, at this point, it's just a mixture of like new business that I use. Like Google AdWords is great because it's just like
Mm-hmm.
some like you know Google AdWords different is an effective form of advertising because it's like you are directly matching the user's intent. Like when you advertise on Facebook, it's almost like sort of advertising the same vein as like Coca-Cola if they were like buy space on a billboard. That's just like they're just marketing that to as many they're just getting that advertisement on as many eyes as humanly possible and hoping some of those eyes
Yeah.
are thirsty people. Whereas like Google AdWords, you are purchasing a search term, like you are purchasing the exact thing that person is searching for in terms of their intent. So I always put money into that every month, into that every month as well.
Okay. So you're getting a lot of like a clients from Google AdWords. That would be your kind of number one way, or not like the strategy which really works for you, or is there any other ones?
So Google AdWords, I think I got like 4 emails just from Google AdWords on Friday rather.
Mm-hmm.
And like honestly, the nice thing too is like with headshots. I mean, I don't really know what other markets are like, but like I can get an email and then have a deposit in less than an hour,
Okay.
via Google AdWords. Especially the nice thing too about it's about the market that I'm in. It's like people have a lot of money. And people are just really people are used to moving quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But it's weird too. It kind of varies. It's almost like 1 month I'll get all of my business from Google AdWords, and then like the following month I'll get all of my business from like traditional search.
Mm-hmm.
And then but like I said, it all just at the end of the day it all just comes together. Like I wouldn't be able to exist on just Google AdWords, and I probably wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
be able to exist on just my current clients, and I wouldn't be able to exist on just cold outreach. But when you put all of those things together, you can.
That's working.
They interlink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. It seems like also depends where you live, right? Because I know different cities and different
Oh,
cultures. It's
1000%.
completely
It's
affects that. Yeah.
no, if 1,000. There's no way that I would be able to do what I do in outside of New York City. I mean, it's
Mhm.
It's probably the largest. I mean, I can't say this, like I'm not looking at like data or anything like that, but I probably, live in the largest photography market in the world,
Yeah.
in terms of not even just commercial photography, but in terms of, I mean, the private, I remember this woman, it was like maybe my third year as a photographer, and this woman hired me to shoot her husband's 40th birthday party. And I delivered the photos, and like 2 weeks later, she still hadn't looked at them, because I have like I use, not to like plug Shootproof, but I use this service. I use this site called Shootproof to like deliver my clients' galleries, and she still hadn't logged in after like 2 weeks. And so finally, I just called her, and I think she called me about like some like mundane billing problem or some mundane billing issue. And I was like, by the way, I've noticed you haven't actually looked at your photos. She was like, oh yeah, we didn't really. She was like, yeah, we'll look at them. We actually just wanted you to be there so that people could see that we hired a professional photographer. I was like, what? She was like, yeah, we just needed people to see that we were like,
Covering the session.
part of the New York scene. So it's like, all
Okay.
right, that works for me, whatever. It's fine. You
Yeah,
paid me. That's
yeah.
fine. Yeah. So I mean, like I do have the luxury of living in like an extremely large market. And yeah, there are a lot of competitors in that market. But I have a pretty good product. So
Mhm. Okay, so let's switch the gears, and I want to talk a little bit about working with those big clients. You've shot some big names, and I know people always like to kind of get a little bit more behind the scenes, how this whole thing kind of worked. You've shot, like I've read you've shot Martin Scorsese, and there's some other big names. Could you tell us a little bit more about those sessions, how that kind of went down? What was your experience working with this type of people? Because I'm guessing it's in and out, but still, like, you need to be prepared. You need to kind of, know exactly what you're doing. But just give us a little bit of kind of like, behind the scenes story, how this whole thing looked like.
So Martin Scorsese is the biggest name I've ever shot. I've shot like Reese Witherspoon. I've shot some football players like Eli Manning. The Martin Scorsese thing actually came about. My first ever client is a church, believe it or not. It's the Paulist Fathers from New York, and they hired me back in like 2015 to photograph an ordination. And I've like since. You reach a point where you outgrow certain clients, and I've outgrown like a lot of clients from 2015. But I mean, it's like a church; it's a bunch of priests. Like I can't, like they email me every now and then, and I'm just like, I always give them like a 60 to 70% discount or something like that, and just because they're nice guys. But and every now and then they'll just like send me like a referral. So in December of this year, it was like a Catholic Historical Association, and they were like, "Hey, we're doing this Q&A. We have a distinguished guest," and I didn't think anything about it. I was just like I've shot a million Q&As with distinguished guests, and like I've never heard of the distinguished guest, which does not make them distinguished. It's just like they're distinguished in their niche. But and I didn't think it, so I just like gave them the quote, and I went about my day. And then like 2 days before the event, I saw in my subject line, Martin Scorsese may not be able to make it. And so I was like, what? And so I read the email, and the distinguished guest was Martin Scorsese. And so I was just there to take photos and at a Q&A. And like, I was there as in a traditional event capacity. I'm not going to lie. But I was like, I'm just going to like throw a Hail Mary. And so I brought all of my gear, over to St. Patrick's Basilica in New York City. And I was waiting for his publicist to come in. His publicist comes in. He's like, all right, so Martin's going to do this. He's going to do this. He's going to do this. And I'm like, cool. And I was like, and by the way, do you think I get a portrait of Mr. Scorsese? And like, I kind of framed it like I was going to get a portrait of like him with the administrative personnel from the university, but like I didn't really like. Let's say I did. I was like, I didn't really care about that. Like I got them. I shot them too. But I was like, by the way, do you think I get a portrait of Mr. Scorsese? And I just kind of looked at him like pleadingly, and he was like, oh, yeah. And he kind of said, and like I know that, yeah, it's the sort of yeah where like 10 minutes later, hey, change plans, no. And so I just like pulled out all of my fashion work which I keep on my phone, and just showed it to him. And he was like, "Oh, yeah, you can shoot Marty." And I was like, and so, but and I like, this was like such a Hail Mary where like I set up my little mini studio like literally right by the front door, because like in my mind, logistically, I was like, he was gonna walk in, he was gonna like step in front of a backdrop for like 30 seconds, because that's all I would get. I didn't even have 30. I had literally 3 at the end of the day, and he would just go about and then go and sit down and be Martin Scorsese. But he was like, "Here's the thing, though. So we're actually going to use the sacristy as like a green room. So can you take all this down and put it back up in like 7 minutes?" And I was like, "Absolutely." So I mean, so like I tore down all of my stuff, put it back up, and after I had set it back up, I took a test photo of his publicist, and like it looked so, like the first photo, just without even not testing the lighting, it looked just fucking, sorry, I just swore, it just looked fantastic. And after that, his publicist like wanted me to shoot him. Like his publicist, like Martin Scorsese, went to the back. They were in there. I was waiting out with my cameras, and his publicist went out and was like, "Where's Joe? We need Joe." And I was like, "Guys, Martin Scorsese needs me. I'll catch you later." And so I went, I went into the back, and I got the shot of Martin Scorsese, and I had like literally 3 seconds to do it, and it was one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. And that was just a really good, moment of initiative on my part. In terms of like a lot of the other like kind of like some, I have a lot of higher end people. I have like a lot of people that I have shot to that just aren't even on my site, because they're just like that big. I recently shot a guy named, I recently shot for a company called Circle Financial, and did a lot of work with them, and they're like really big in the digital asset space, and they're a very, very nice team. And who else? Yeah, I have a lot of, yeah, and then I'm trying to think. And like the Reese Witherspoon thing came about. Like I was working for DocuSign at the time, and Reese Witherspoon was like doing a meet and greet with them, and she did a meet and greet with the team. So it's like a lot of the big names that I've worked with have just been like fairly kind of like, just moments of opportunity. I've like been commissioned here and there, not in like an official like you're shooting this magazine cover or something like that. It's just kind of like being at the right place, the right time, with the right client.
Yeah. So who among all this, like, big names was the most interesting person to work with? And then do you have like any interesting story which kind of is associated with one of those photo shoots?
I don't like, I'm not sure if I like want to like give, like I remember I was like really like, Reese Witherspoon is like incredibly bubbly in like a very genuine way. And I remember, and I was like really stressed out because like I had to do this meet and greet, and I was like shooting this massive event at the same, like concurrently, and this huge line of people was waiting. And I mean, I was just like, I was already on my second day, and I was already like underslept. And so I was like halfway through the shoot, and I remember just like looked at Reese Witherspoon, and I was like, and she like looked back at me, and she was like in like this really exaggerated, like angelic Reese Witherspoon sort of way. I think that she was probably the nicest person that I've worked. I've worked with over the years. Like I'm not gonna sit there and claim that I like shoot famous people every day, but I did just spend a couple hours with a well-known guitarist's daughter after she signed with an agency. I don't have any like crazy celebrity stories. Eli Manning is like 1,000,000 feet tall. I know that. He like, I literally had to like take my camera into that when he was like standing right next to me. The Reese Witherspoon story was like Martin Scorsese. I think that the interaction that I had with Martin Scorsese was interesting because it was like, I think that there are two camps of people when somebody's in a room with Martin Scorsese. I think there's two camps of people. There are people that worship him because he's like one of the most famous people on the planet and like an arbiter of human culture, and then there are people that worship him because of his body of work and what he's accomplished. And so like I think that once he realized that I was like in that latter camp, you know, I mean, like I've seen, like I don't know, I can't remember how many times I've seen like Casino or Goodfellas or something like that, but once he realized that I was in that latter camp, then he was like a pretty affable person. I remember I was like, and I remember after The Irishman came out, for some reason I watched The Irishman like once a year. And I'm not really sure what that says about my character, because it's like about a sociopath that ends up killing his best friend, you know? But I told him that. I was like, yeah, I watched The Irishman like once a year. And he's like, oh, you poor thing, you know? But he, you know, and I was like, I still, like, I've worked with some very, very beautiful women, and I've worked with some very, very famous people, and I've like kind of become desensitized to all of it. But I still very much turned into like a child around Martin Scorsese. He was like he like shook my hand, and he was like, "Thank you for your time," and I was like, "Have a nice day." Like I couldn't think of what to say. I was like, "What to say?" You know? Yeah, that was cool though. He was definitely my favorite of all time.
Perfect. Okay, so let's switch the gear and let's talk a little bit about you know, what's happening in our industry when it comes to AI. I always want to, you know, ask photographers who are deep into that industry about, you know, what's their opinion, what is their kind of like way looking at it. You know, we see this massive transition over the last few years, and it's getting kind of like crazy nowadays with all this new image generators and all this stuff, which just, I'm not saying replacing photography, but it's just the new tools which completely gonna, I think, shift photography into completely different direction. So what is your how you look at it? You know, are you using AI into your workflow? Like, I know, like when it comes to the retouching and all this stuff, but I want to just talk a little bit in general, like what is this AI doing to the photography industry? What is your take on it? What is your opinion?
So I have integrated AI into my everyday workflow, but not directly related to editing. Like I feel like I talk to ChatGPT like multiple times per day, and ask for its advice on things. In terms of my own workflow, you know, I definitely use Photoshop retouching. You know, where you just like mask over somebody and just type in like retouch skin. I don't know if you do that a lot, but it's frustrating because like I feel like 50% of the time you get a result where it just like puts lotion on the person's face, which is annoying. But in terms of, I'm not really hugely concerned about AI, because I feel like kind of the direction my work is going in, I'm sort of becoming, I don't know, I feel like at the end of the day, like the more, like I've been doing this now since 2013, and I work a lot, and so I feel like you sort of reach a certain point where people are kind of hiring you not necessarily just for your photography skills, but like your taste. You know, at the end of the day, like, you know, a shot that people are hiring you because you're telling them like what looks good, you know, and a person can't necessarily type something into a prompt and have that return to that. It's hard to explain what I'm necessarily like trying to articulate in terms of, you know, what it's going to do for the, I mean, like I said, I've been working in the fashion industry for a while, and right now I primarily just work for the modeling agencies around town. But, you know, where I think that direction will head is, you know, models, for instance, probably won't have to do anywhere near as much travel as they do. They'll just license out their likeness, and then it'll be just recreated with AI. But I do think that photographers still will be integral to that process, because the photographers will still need to kind of like produce the plates that the models are going to use, that is going to train the AI to begin with. You know, I don't think it's really just going to be like, I don't think that there is going to be this thing where, you know, you shoot somebody's face and then you feed it into an AI, and then the AI just kind of uses that ad infinitum, you know, till the end of that person's career. I think it's more going to be like, you know, AI and photography is still going to be like heavily intertwined,
Merged together. Yeah.
you know. Personally, I'm kind of excited about AI because I've been getting into filmmaking, and it's, you know, it'll be nice to automate B-roll, you know, that I don't really necessarily want to do, although it's still kind of fun. Um, but you know, not having to like last weekend I was in my studio and I was like sitting there like recording. What did I record? I recorded a bunch of boiling water. I recorded an egg beater, and just all sorts of like weird, like this would look cool in fashion sort of stuff. And not having to do that, you know, and instead like spending a Saturday afternoon like in a museum or something sounds good to me. So yeah, I personally am not super threatened by AI, because I feel like, you know, where I'm going with my work, I feel like I'm kind of going into more of the realm of like being a creator, or like, you know, somebody that, or and as opposed to like necessarily just like somebody that gets hired for their technical execution of a vocation.
So do you think AI might affect headshot photography? Because like, and the reason I'm asking about it, so I actually was approached at some point with the company which they like they create like some kind of AI model where you feed it with your selfies, and this whole thing was just spitting out some kind of like professional headshots, right? So
Right,
they gave me access to it, to kind of play with it and see how this whole thing kind of feels, and then you know what I'm getting. And I can tell you, like, it was really off. Like it would, you know, like even the images at the first glance were okay, but
right,
then when you started kind of analyzing them a little bit deeper, then you start seeing all these flaws, and then the more you analyze them, you know, like you could really kind of go into this kind of like, holy smokes, this is really bad, right?
right.
But I know people are using them, right? And especially, I think if you work for the model agencies and then all this kind of places, like I know, like the agencies I'm working with, they completely refusing this type of shots. Like it's just literally forbidden to kind of post any AI created images on their portfolios and stuff like that. So I think some of those agencies, they're really taking this seriously. But at the same time, you know, the entire technology is progressing, right? So you know it's getting better. And so I just want to ask you, like, you know, how you feel about the headshot photography. You know, do you think it's a threat for this industry, or do you think it's the AI is going to take a little bit of time to kind of hit the level where, you know, those images, they're going to be even usable?
Yeah, no, AI is still very nascent, and you know, proof of this is like just, you know, like I said, like all you really need to do is like log in and try to use Photoshop AI, and you know, half the time it doesn't even really use your instructions. It just kind of like they're
Mhm.
like when you mask over somebody's face and then you type in like retouch skin, like also, you know, like I said, like I feel like, you know, I right now I mostly use AI for retouching,
Mhm.
and it does beautiful work. I feel like it's very random, but it does a very good job of retouching people. But the reason I'm telling you this is because, you know, you mask somebody in, you type out a set of instructions, and then generative AI will supposedly give you work based around those instructions. But I feel like it doesn't even really listen to the instructions. It's just
No.
still just like, because I always type in like retouch skin with no product, because I just get super frustrated with like it constantly putting lotion on people's faces and skin repair product and stuff like that. So like
Yeah.
because it's being trained on like L'Oreal ads or just
Mhm.
skincare ads and stuff. And so I um, it I say it doesn't really use your text prompts. It just kind of goes with like the person's
Yeah.
underlying structure, you know, and beautifies it. But in terms of, you know, headshot photography and AI, like I think that people will always use photographers
Yeah.
to get it's because it's just one, the AI just it's really not there, you know.
No.
And two,
Yeah.
I think it's just there's just something like personal about a photograph that AI just doesn't have. I mean, it still feels like to me, and I'm not saying this because I'm a photographer. It just feels it it doesn't feel professional now that
Yeah.
I think about it. It's like it doesn't feel professional to walk over to your window, and most people don't even do this. Most people don't even know to walk in front of a window. Most people will just like they'll take a photo like under their bathroom, under the light on their bathroom,
Mhm.
and so it doesn't really feel professional to take a selfie, take a series of selfies, and then feed them to a website. As well as that's charging like $15. It's like so.
Actually, it's not as cheap, believe it or not.
Oh,
Actually,
really?
what was interesting for me, and again, like I don't think this company is still kind of pushing this forward. I think they just kind of like
Oh.
shut it down. And but what was interesting for me, they went after like what was funny for me, they went after quantity, not the quality. So like depends what kind of package you bought it, the more images you were getting. But
Mhm.
what was funny, they gave me the full access to it. And what was interesting, doesn't matter, you can get 100 or 500 images. If they all crap, then it doesn't make any difference, right? Because
Mhm.
from the kind of business perspective, when the people come to us, they pretty much they want to have 2-3 shots which are good and they're good to go, right? Like they
Right.
don't need 500 images. So that was kind of interesting. But also, what was fascinating for me, there was this lack of face expressions, right? That was something which I've noticed in those shots, that the AI couldn't really control the face expressions. They all were like, the images look like the soulless, like there's like literally those very cold, uninspired, unapproachable, images, which it's really just push you off from even looking at it. So I think they still have like a long way to go. But when they actually approached me first time, I was just like, holy smokes, if this is existing right now, this is gonna, I'm not saying take over, but it was fascinating for me that people even pursuing this kind of technologies, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm. Yeah. I don't have a huge amount of insight on
Mhm.
AI.
Well, this is just my kind of one time kind of experience, right? So
Right.
I just, and I think photographers should talk about it, right? Because I think, as I said, like, when you look at those shots at the first kind of glance, they look okay. But working with people every single day, we can see all those nuances, we can see all those flaws way better than the average person, right? Because we have that experience, right? So I
Right.
think sharing that with the public and having discussion about it, I think is extremely important, at least the way I look
I
at it, right?
I agree with you, and then I think that AI headshots, at least the ones that I've seen, always just look very generic.
Hmm.
They always look like stock photography. They always look like almost like stock photos.
Yeah.
Um, I like I said, like I'm not I'm not super concerned about AI headshots. I mean, I have absolutely no idea. I'm sure it's taken business from me, but also too, it's like the sort of client that is would rather feed a bunch of images into a machine in order to pay $15 for products is not really the sort of client that I want to begin with.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, that's the first thing, right? Like those are not our clients anyways.
right?
So why we should even kind of like
Worry
be
about them.
worried about
Yeah.
it? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I have one more question for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to talk about, and maybe not talk about, I would like to hear your opinion, or some kind of, if you wouldn't mind, share kind of advice to photographers who are starting off,
Mm-hmm.
people who are, getting into this industry. They want to be photographers. They want to, I don't know, just shoot headshots or portraits or whatever they want to do. What would be your advice to them based on your experience being in this industry for so long? what they
Uh,
should focus on, what's the goal, how they can kind of take this whole thing under the wings and then kind of be successful in that industry.
so my first piece of advice is to not set your prices based around what everybody else is pricing their
Hmm.
photography at, because it's like when you first get in this industry, and like a really perfect example is I had a kid and he called me out of the blue like 2 months ago. He was like, "Hey, I just started out. I came across your website. I literally just got into event photography." He was like, "And I saw your work. Do you need any help with anything? Is there any way I could buy you a cup of coffee or something like that?" And so I invited him over to my studio, and I've actually ended up hiring him for a few different jobs. But I was like, "Well, what are you charging people?" And he was like, he had just quoted somebody like $1,200 for 2 hours, and I was like, you've been doing this for 2 months. Like, why are you quoting somebody $1,200 for 2 hours? I mean, like, if you can get it, awesome.
Hmm.
But like, you're not going to get consistent and regular work quoting people out at what you hear. Like, I feel like a lot of people get in this industry and they hear about all these photographers like charging these crazy rates, and they immediately start charging them, and nobody buys it because you don't have the portfolio to back it up.
Hmm.
I'm not saying that you need to do everything for free. I'm not saying you need to do everything for $50, but like when I've been doing this for a long time in New York City, and I mean, like when I first started out, like I would do in-office headshots for like $200, $250. Like to me like and I would never do this now, but I mean like to me like making like I mean any way you slice it, making like $300 for an hour's work, and I know that it's not an hour. There's like commute and stuff like that, but like $300 like an hour's worth of work is like not a bad wage.
Hmm.
And so my advice, to, like people that are just starting out, is do not base your pricing around what other people are charging, because you're going to end up overcharging people, and you're not going to get work because of it. I'm not, like I said, don't have to work for free. I mean, and also too, that's the thing. And my second piece of advice, and the nice thing about this too, is that by shooting at more of an entry level rate, you'll work more, you'll get more experience,
Hmm.
and that segues into my second piece of advice: is just shoot as much as humanly possible. I mean, I shoot all the time. And honestly, like I still occasionally even do unpaid work. I mean, it's
Hmm.
it's it's for a very very select few pieces of clientele, but because at the end of the day, like we're still doing this because we enjoy it. You
Yeah.
know, like I'll have like like I'll have friends that they'll be like, "What are you doing this Saturday?" I'll be like, "Oh, I'm shooting this girl for this agency," and like at one time that came up with like it was unpaid, and I was like, but I enjoy it. Just because I'm getting paid most of the time for something doesn't mean that I still. It's like going back to Eli Manning. It's like, what, he has to get paid to play football in his backyard? Like, no. Like it's something I want to do.
Hmm.
Um, so don't like get consistently hung up on what people are charging, and charge what you're worth. And then two, like don't, and just shoot as much as possible,
Yeah.
and if you aren't going to get paid for something, make sure it interests you and make sure it's going to be of benefit to you.
Yeah, 100%. And I think also nowadays we've been hearing all this crazy advices from photographers, and I don't know, even photographers, but those like business coaches and stuff.
Oh, don't even get me started
Yeah.
on the Instagram pyramid schemes. Like those, yeah. Oh, and avoid those.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
literally,
exactly.
I like, it was like a month ago, and some guy's ad came across my feed, and it was, I made $0 as a freelancer 1 month, and it was the greatest thing to ever happen to me because I turned to coaching. And I was like, are you literally trying to tell me that you couldn't get any business and now you're coaching people on how to get business? Like, that's how crazy things are getting right now. And people are
Yeah.
making hand over fist of it because they're basically just buying these programs and just selling the programs out to other people.
Yeah.
Um,
Actually, I had a friend of mine who actually told me he actually got into one of those courses, and it was fascinating for me, like as you said, people who have no idea, they never been in this industry, they coaching how to do the business in the industry, they even have no clue how this works. And everything was just based on all this like um inspirational quotes, and then making you feel good about yourself, and charging insane amount of money based on as you said, those ridiculous quotes for something you don't even know how to do it properly. And they just like charging tons of money for that, screw
Hmm.
you over big time, because like you just like digging yourself in the even bigger hole.
Right.
And it's not bringing any valuable work to the stuff what you do. So yeah, it's just insane, and people fall for this stuff. I don't know why they don't do any type of kind of research, what these people have done before. Are they even part of this industry? Like what kind of um I don't know if they're successful, right? Like how the hell someone who never had a camera in their hand, they teach you how to do the business in this industry? It's just
No,
absolutely yeah.
it's yeah. I mean that like that I still can't really get used to. Um, I still I can't be totally neutral when I see those
Yeah.
ads. Like even like they've been running for years, and I still like every now and then I have to like resist the urge to like say something really rude to the guy on his comment in this feed. I actually have a few times. I've like gone back and forth with a few of these guys,
Mhm.
um, because they're just at the end of the day they're just multi-level marketers,
Mhm.
and I'm sure that some of them, like I said, are probably making. I'm sure that people that are at the top are making millions of dollars from it, but I mean,
Yeah.
I can't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, thank you so much for the conversation. I truly appreciated your time.
Yeah, of course.
We had great chat. Thank you for all the feedback and sharing all your insight stories, and then your approach to photography. That was truly amazing. And yeah, you know what? Let's kind of keep that, I would say, friendship going, and then maybe in the next few months we can kind of jump in again on this podcast and then talk more about what's happening in this crazy world of headshot photography.
That'd be great. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, thank you everyone for watching, and everyone who stayed that long. We truly appreciated your time, and yeah, we'll chat soon. Take care.
Bye.